esa cadena de amor. And I would like to present kung sino po ang mga participant natin sa Rigodon. I will call them one by partner. QPAM Youth, the cousin, Mr. Norman Relis and Hannah Chan Urbano. Our daughter of QPAM President, Juan Chan Urbano. Another QPAM Youth, Mr. Carlo Mali and Miss Aubrey Manahan. That was the son of Anjo and Catherine Maling and daughter of Ferdy Saida Manahan. From QPAM guest, the mother and son tandem, Mr. Jimmy Shan and his loving mother, Gigi Shan. Thank you. Another QPAM guest, Mr. and Mel and Rochelle Benaventura. QPAM Ugat,
Mr. and Mrs. Manny and Nati Aquino.
Yan, our hermana, 1993.
Now we would like to call upon Gil Cagula and Mrs. Leia Magsimo.
Ayan, so here is a meeting of Mr. Dr. Romy Magsino, who just recently arrived from the Philippines. Palakpakan po natin.
Mr. Ron Pantiveros and Mrs. Normita Sinvalisti.
Our QPAM advisor. Ron Pantiveros is our past QPAM president, 1989 to 1995.
We would like to call upon the QPAM members, Mr. and Mrs. Ben and Faye Ahato.
Mr. and Mrs. Ben and Faye Ahato is Mano Hermana 1995.
Mr. and Mrs. Tex and Carmen De Luna.
Mr. and Mrs. Tex and Carmen De Luna, our Hermana 2004.
Mr. and Mrs. Manny and Presi Padre.
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Mayan, Presi Padre is one of our active members.
Mr. and Mrs. Ernesto and Banji Natosa.
Mr. and Mrs. Ernesto and Magina Todos was our hermana 1998.
Mr. Alfredo Odobiza and Mrs. Lina Merluza.
Mr. and Mrs. Merluza was our hermana Mr. and Mrs. Rick and Chrissy Andrade, our current QPAM treasurer.
Mr. and Mrs. Norman and Candy Padilla.
Mr. and Mrs. Norman and Candy Padilla, our man 2011, and our current QPAM secretary.
Mr. Eddie Rubina and Mrs. Rowena Arquero.
Mr. Eddie Rivia and Mrs. Rowena Arquero is our QPAM vice president external.
Mr. and Mrs. Oli and Presi Verdusa.
Mr. and Mrs. Oli and President Marusa, our man 2014, current QPAM vice president internal, and Mrs. Manitoba.